It can be hard to get along with family, and even harder if your twin wants to kill you.
To Gina, it was a diabolically perfect plan. She would kill her twin sister, assume her identity, and no one would ever know it happened.
On Killer Kin, a podcast from ID, you'll hear true stories about family members who turn against each other. Find out if evil is a family trait. Listen to Killer Kin on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely. And parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/getstarted. That's GREENLIGHT.com/getstarted.
Road trip!
I can't believe you let you guys talk me into this.
What?
Man.
Come on, Cecil. It's going to be fun.
Well, not.
And what
fun.
better way to prepare for my essay this week, The First Drive Across America? Eli, have you used the bathroom already?
Yes, I used the bathroom already. I'm not a child, Noah. Shotgun middle!
Who calls shotgun middle?
I like to use you and Tom as a thunder blanket.
Seriously, why do we have to be back here with him? What?
Sorry, Cecil, I'm driving and tall guy gets shotgun.
Yeah, it's like the one benefit. So nice.
Tom, are you okay with this? Right. Falls asleep whenever we're not directly doing anything. Cool.
He does. That's true. It falls right asleep.
Okay, so quick ground rules. 1, if you need to use the bathroom, use it now because I'm not stopping every 20 minutes. 2, Heath is DJ until I don't like his music, and then it's my mixed CD. And 3, if we hit a deer or a guy who doesn't look like he has a family, we didn't. Okay?
Absolutely.
Got it.
Fine, sure. Yeah.
Wait.
Yes.
I have to poop again.
Seriously?
See, that's what I figured.
I am in hell. This is hell.
Well, not exactly. When he tries to hold it, you're in hell. Trust me on that. All right, now, who's ready for a little Backstreet Boys deep cut, right?
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts because this is the internet. That's how it works now. I'm Cecil, and I'll be manning this service station, but I'll need my customers. First up, 2 guys fighting over the last roller hot dog, Heath and Tom.
I like how it looks like an obstacle course, you know, like a Japanese game show.
It really does.
All right, Cecil, I don't know how many Michelin stars the Amoco in your neighborhood has, but if I'm not eating at the gas station, how am I going to get my recommended daily allowance of cheese skin?
Fair.
Yes, that's fair. That is fair. Also joining us tonight, the person who used the bathroom 3 times during one pit stop, and the guy who's just going to hold it till the next gas station, Eli and Noah.
13.59% of Americans suffer from IBS, Cecil. I am a survivor.
I'm not putting a ribbon on my car, Eli.
Bigots. You're all bigots. Just so you know. Bigots.
Okay. I want to thank
strong.
all our patrons that threw in a few bucks for gas money. And all you people riding for free should thank them too. And if you'd like to learn how to join their ranks, be sure to stick around till the end of the show. With that out of the way, tell us, Tom, what person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
Today, we will be talking about the first drive across America.
Okay. Noah, why did you pick this topic?
Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but I have a little notebook that I keep in my office where I jot down ideas for Citation Needed episodes. So whenever I'm watching a documentary or reading a book or whatever, and I come across something that seems promising, I'll just jot it down.
Yeah, I have a suicide note that's like 14 pages at this point.
Thank you for the little upbeat there, Eli. So at one point, I was reading a Bill Bryson book, and I came across a couple of paragraphs about this story. And for like a year and a half, it's been sitting in my notebook written as follows. Horatio Nelson Jackson, first drive across America, and then underlined for emphasis, bulldog in goggles. And yes,
yes.
this
Seriously?
story will feature a bulldog in goggles.
You are edging me right now, No Illusions.
Aren't I?
Edging me? Consider me edged. Are you serious?
Yes, I am. So
Where
now,
did he get
unfortunately,
those goggles? What? Where did he do that? I
we'll
just
get there.
thought.
We'll get there.
He
Yeah.
thinks he's people.
Foreshadowing.
So stupid.
Now, unfortunately, when I checked the Wikipedia article about it, there wasn't really enough there for a full episode. And so I figured maybe I couldn't do this or I'd have to combine it with something. But then last week, I learned that Ken Burns had actually made like hour and 40-minute documentary about this for PBS back in 2003. So I want to admit that I am leaning heavily on that documentary. It's called Horatio's Drive, America's First Road Trip. Also, I would strongly recommend it. It's a fun documentary. It's filled with some amazing period photos, including, dog in goggles. Also, Tom Hanks does the voice for Horatio Nelson Jackson reading his letters to his wife.
Yeah, and Gilbert Gottfried does the voice of the dog. It's really cute.
Noah, this is going to feel really incomplete without slow panning over old photos while you do this and me taking notes from my social studies class, but I guess go on.
I can't do anything about the photographs, but you can take notes for social studies. I'm not stopping. So this story starts in 1903 at a hoity-toity rich guy club in San Francisco, California. This dude, Horatio Nelson Jackson, who went by Nelson, but I'm going to call him Horatio because that seems more in keeping with the old-timiness of the story. Anyway, so he's there with his wife. And he overhears a couple of people at the next table talking about these newfangled automobiles and how they're never going to replace the good old-fashioned horse. And look, we have a bit of a habit, I think, of giggling at the obtuse dummies back in 1903 that thought that cars would never catch on. But in their defense, the horse had been serving that function for 6,000 fucking years. Right? So, like that novelty that showed up the day before yesterday won't replace a 6 millennia old technology isn't quite as dumb an argument as it seems with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, especially when you consider that most cars were just giant Looney Tune bombs until 1996.
Really? Yes.
Call me old-fashioned, but I like my coffee black, my trips on horseback, and my women cured of hysteria by hand jobs from professional doctors. This car's going nowhere.
No, but Horatio was a techno-optimist, apparently, because he took the counterpoint. He argued that cars were destined to become the dominant mode of transportation in the country. The other party, whose name has been lost to history, apparently, argued that cars were just good for short pleasure trips for rich people. Horatio's rebuttal was a $50 bet that he could drive a car all the way across the country inside 3 months. He gave himself a little leeway there. And this was an unusual bet because, A, $50 was a lot of fucking money at that point. It was the equivalent of about $1,500 today. And B, Horatio Nelson Jackson did not own a car and he had never driven one before.
Well, I mean, lack of microphones and experience didn't stop any of us from starting a podcast. So I kind of see.
Yeah. Good point. iPods are the wave of the future. Absolutely. I was a Zune guy back in the day, but, lesson learned.
A
I'm a big guy,
$1,500
too.
upside hardly seems worth the trouble if you have to buy the car before you win and then drive across Indiana at any point in this process.
Insult
big
to
loss.
injury, man.
Big
Yeah.
loss. Yeah.
Now, to understand this bet, first you have to know a little bit about Horatio. So he came from a well-to-do family and married into a much weller-to-do one. He started his adult life as a physician. He got his MD from the University of Vermont in 1893, back before we knew enough about medicine to make that mean much.
Yeah, that was just a weekend correspondence course. It also came with improv class. It all helped you with your humors.
Humors.
So,
Nice.
but in 1899, he married Bertha Wells, daughter of Vermont's third richest man, William Wells. William had made a fortune selling something called Payne's Celery Compound, which claimed to be a panacea, but was actually just 40 proof alcohol with celery extracts in it.
Sounds like the scotch Heath drinks before someone died a cigarette out in it. That's what it's.
Okay. It's notes of treacle. It's other stuff, too.
So shortly after his marriage, Horatio got kind of sick one time, and he said, well, shit, I guess I'm never going to recover enough from that to work again. So I might as well spend the rest of my days kicking back, spending your dad's money, and making historically outlandish bets, huh?
Yeah, I tried the same thing with Anna, but she was all like, what money? Women, am I right?
Now, and to be clear, like, this bet and thinking that he could win it was fucking nuts. So keep in mind that the first car ever sold in the U.S. was sold in 1898. That is 5 years before this bet. Hell, it had only been 15 years since Carl Benz took his fucking 3-wheeled Benz patent motor car out for its first test drive and birthed the automotive revolution to begin with. In 1903, people still hadn't figured out how to handle the very concept of the automobile. A couple of incredible examples from the documentary. In Vermont, they had just done away with a red flag law that said that if you wanted to drive a car, you had to have a dude walk in front of you waving a red flag to warn pedestrians.
Walk?
Okay, we still have to do this whenever Eli drives for insurance reasons.
Well, right,
so.
yeah, exactly.
No.
For most people, it's very
Smart.
impractical. Tennessee had a law on the books in 1903 that said that if you wanted to drive somewhere in an automobile, you had to post your route 2 weeks in advance to warn pedestrians. And in Illinois, somebody stretched a steel cable across the road to catch what he called the devil wagons.
What?
Yeah, suffice to say, it was not a very car-friendly nation at this point.
Okay, so he's going to be driving through and just be like, all right, so wait, is that a cop spread-eagled in the middle of a spider web made of steel going across the road? I'm just going to drive through it, I guess. That's
Okay.
That's weird.
You guys joke, but when my son was a baby, people used to drag race up and down our street and wake him. And Anna had to physically stop me from doing the winch wire thing because it was technically murder. I still think I should have done it. I still think it was a good idea.
There are justifiable homicides, yeah. But the biggest obstacle facing Horatio, though, was the lack of infrastructure. There were fewer than 150 miles of paved roads in the entire country at this point, and every one of those was in a major city. The tracks across the rural areas, they were designed for horse-drawn wagons to the extent that they existed at all. There were no street signs, there were no route numbers, there were no road maps, because who the fuck would need them? Right? And while most municipal stores did carry gasoline for like cooked stoves and farm equipment, it's not like you could pull up to a fucking Chevron whenever your tank got low. It's also not like you could buy spare parts along the way or get a flat fixed.
So it's like owning a Tesla right now, is what you're saying.
very similar.
All right. Cecil, wait for the story to play out. We don't know yet if they catch on fire with the doors locked or the doors unlocked.
Oh, yeah, right.
It's
Yeah,
important.
but no, everybody survives this trip.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
now, so I should also point out,
So
by the way,
doors unlocked then. Got it.
well, actually, there are no doors, but we'll get there. So I should point out that, by the way, that Horatio was not the first person to attempt this trip. Right, that honor goes to two brothers named Louise and John Davis, who made the first known attempt in 1899, leaving from New York City. And not only did they not make it, but according to one contemporary account, quote, a one-armed bicyclist who left the city 10 days later passed them by in Syracuse, end quote.
Okay, that's rough. That's just embarrassing. You're in a car and some one-armed guy's like, on your left.
Okay. Okay.
Fuck you. I hate when people say that.
That feels like an ableist description for no reason. Does the arm affect your cycling ability?
I feel like, on bumpy roads, it probably does.
turns.
It would have
maybe,
been an
yeah.
even better story if it was a one-legged cycle.
Yeah,
that's what I'm
that's
talking
fair.
about.
Excited.
That's fair. So the first serious attempt came a couple of years later from a guy named Alexander Winton. He's actually the guy who built the first car that was ever sold in the U.S. And in cars' early history, Winton was one of the big manufacturers. So for his trip, he decided to go west to east, since that lets you get the hardest part out of the way first. But the downside of that is that you have to go through the hardest part first. Right. So he left from San Francisco. He made it about 500 miles in 10 days. And then he got hopelessly bogged down in a sand dune in the Nevada desert and called it quits.
Okay, I don't like where this is going. Noah, if any of these guys turn out to be Nazis, you're stealing my thing. You're stealing my thing.
Yeah, and if you're making it up, you're stealing mine. So what I'm saying is we're watching you, Noah. We're watching you.
Now, Horatio was apparently aware of Winton's attempt and decided to avoid a repeat of that problem by starting off going north into the Cascade Mountains and avoiding the desert altogether. This would add about 1,000 miles to the trip and a whole extra mountain range.
Turns out the automobile is not suited to the rigors of open desert. So horizontal isn't really the thing. Let's try verticality.
Right.
Pretty much, yes. So the first thing he had to do, of course, was get himself a car. got a Winton, actually. He overpaid for a slightly used 2-cylinder Winton touring car, which he named the Vermont. The second thing he needed was somebody who knew how to drive and repair that thing. This somebody came in the form of one Sewell K. Crocker, a mechanic that he met in San Fran that would become the Clark to his Lewis, except that Lewis brought more than 0 useful skills to the table. And so without a photo, it is hard to express just how prehistoric this fucking car is, okay? There's no roof, so they're just out in the elements when it rains. There are no doors, as I mentioned. There's no fucking windshield. It's damn near, it's 4 wheels on a chassis with a bench welded to it.
It looks like a Roman chariot got cursed by like a steampunk witch. It's seriously, it's just a Chesterfield sofa and like 4 wheels taped to the side. It's
more or less. Yeah, so originally it had a back seat, but they had to remove that to make room for all the spare parts and fuel, not to mention all their camping gear, cooking gear, and the food that they needed to bring along since we were 45 years from the creation of the first drive-thru. The engine, which was mounted underneath the driver's seat, had all a 20 horsepower, and in ideal conditions, its top speed was 30 miles per hour. From one coast to the other, they would never encounter ideal conditions.
Feels like someone bet they could survive a night in Antarctica in a blanket fort. Like
it really has that feel, yeah. So Horatio and Sewell set off on May 23rd, 1903. First, they took a ferry from San Francisco to Oakland, and then it was off into the untamed wilderness. Or at least the first 15 miles of the untamed wilderness, which is how far they made it before they blew a fucking tire. They replaced that with a spare, but at this rate, they realized that they were going to need something like 217 spare tires for the trip, right? And they'd only brought one. Now, they wanted more, but again, cars were just some weird rich person novelty at that point. Like one spare tire for this particular model of Winton was all that the city of San Francisco had to offer. So now, though, with the extent to which they were underprepared only slightly starting to dawn on them, they headed north into the mountains, into a part of the U.S. that earned the distinction at that time of being further from the nearest railroad than anywhere else in the country.
Oh, well, that's probably also the furthest place in the country from vinyl chloride, too. And on that note, let's take a quick break for some apropos of nothing.
Wow, Uncle Horatio, I can't believe you traveled through time just to see what it's like to go across the country in the future.
Indeed I did, my boy. Now, glad to see that Jacksons haven't lost their explorer's spirit.
We sure haven't. All right, are you ready for our first big trial?
Indeed I am.
All right, we're going to have to take our shoes off for security.
And leave them here?
Oh, no, you just put them on the thing in the bucket, and then you pick them back up on the other side. But it sucks. It really sucks.
Right.
But that ain't the half of it. When we get to the gate, even though they said I could bring this bag, they might change their minds.
Oh, forcing you to leave your worldly goods behind. I'm well familiar with that.
No, it does still go on the plane, but then I have to wait to get it back.
Oh, I see, but you're upset because it's got all the supplies that you're going to need for the long journey, and we may starve because of that.
I mean, technically the journey's only like 8 hours.
8 hours?
Yeah, and there's food on the plane. But it's not very good food. It's not, it's...
I see. Great-grandnephew.
Yes, great Uncle Jackson?
Are you a big old pussy?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Before we left off, 2 delirious guys were wandering through the mountains hallucinating that the other guy's a giant spare tire. What happened next, Noah?
A lot more of that, actually. So we're going to rejoin our heroes in Alturas, California. Now, these days, if you wanted to drive from San Francisco to Alturas, it would take, according to Google Maps, about 6 hours in light traffic. Took Jackson and Crocker a week and a half. Once they got into the Cascade Mountains, they were constantly having to stop to dig out minor landslides or push away boulders. Again, these roads were intended for horses and fucking horse-drawn wagons, right? So, like, there wasn't always a bridge when you would come to a shallow river. Because a fucking horse can just wade over that shit, right? So when they came across something like that, they'd have to just drive as far as they could get the fucking Vermont in. Then they would swim or wade their way across, find something to secure a pulley to, and winch the fucking thing over the riverbed and onto the other side of the road. And given the conditions of the road, by the way, it didn't always take a river crossing for them to have to resort to block and tackle.
Okay, I feel like you just caulk the wagon, right? And then you deal with like amoebic dysentery or whatever. It's basic stuff and you're fine.
Well, for me. No, but road conditions were the only thing slowing them down here. Rand McNally wouldn't publish their first road atlas until 1924. There are no street names once you get out of the cities. So they had to just rely on the word of strangers when they were planning their route. Sometimes that would go spectacularly wrong for them. Like one point where they ended up taking like 108-mile dead-end detour because they asked some lady on horseback for directions, and instead of telling them how to get to town, she sent them off this nowhere-ass road that led to her parents' house because her family had never seen an automobile before.
That's fantastic.
That's actually how you find a polling station in a red state, too. It's the same exact process.
I get that she wanted her parents to see an automobile, but was it also her dream for them to see one filled with guys cursing her name and promising to cave her head in with a shovel if they ever saw her again? Seems,
yes.
Maybe.
So on the way to Alturas, they'd both gained and lost some supplies. In Sacramento, they'd picked up a more powerful searchlight to augment the Vermont's feeble headlights, and they picked up several used inner tubes in lieu of a proper replacement spare. But all the bumpy-ass roads and yanking the car through rivers shit also caused them to lose a lot of supplies that would either just fall off the back or float away. That included all their cooking gear and at least 2 pair of Horatio spectacles in the first 10 days.
All right, spectacles are gone, but I still have testicles, wallet, and watch. So I think we're okay.
75 is still a passing grade, damn it. But there was some shit they needed that they could not get in Sacramento, and that's what led to the stop in Alturas. They'd wired San Francisco about some replacement parts and spare tires, and those were on the way, but they had to come on a covered wagon, which was considerably slower. So they'd stopped in Alturas to give the wagon a chance to catch up. Ultimately, they spent 3 days there charging people for short trips in the Vermont and otherwise basking in the celebrity of having the coolest thing that would pass through Alturas, California in anyone there's lifetime.
I'm sorry, Noah. A chance to catch up? Was the covered wagon also taking 108-mile one-way pit stops to Auntie May's house for like pancakes and a good ogling?
Well, it may be that she never saw, like my family's never seen a big old covered wagon full of auto parts. I don't know. So now I should emphasize here too what a big fucking deal it was for people to see a car back then. Right? Like at this point in history, car drove through town, newsworthy event. A lot of what we know about this trip actually is from old news clippings from the various towns that they drove through along the way. And because news travels faster than San Francisco to Alturas in 10 fucking days, before too long, the various towns along their route were eagerly awaiting their arrival. There's one amazing article from a paper called the Lakeview Examiner that told people to gather early to see the car when it came through, since when it went through town, it might be traveling as fast as 90 miles per hour, so you wouldn't have much time to take it in.
Would it?
No. So to be clear, in the same year, a new automotive speed record was set at 68 miles per hour, and Jackson and Crocker probably never got much up over 20. During their trip.
Okay, so they had like big crowds gathered, and there's like a guy with binoculars looking ahead. All right, I see a guy on a rolling couch taking a really difficult shit from like amoebic dysentery or something. Is the automobile coming after that? What am I looking at?
Now, of course, not everybody saw their car as a marvel of the modern world. Some people were scared as fuck of it. I particularly liked a story Horatio shared with his wife about a homesteader that saw his car coming, assumed it was a train that had somehow jumped the track, and then stuffed himself and his family under their carriage as it puttered by.
Mabel, kids, get down, hide, the train is coming. Hold. Hold. Hold.
I could just, I feel like we
Shush,
could,
shush,
okay.
shush.
Okay.
Hold. Okay.
So, so there were also people who saw this as a money-making opportunity, especially store owners who knew that they had the only gasoline for sale within like 100 miles. And seriously, there were times where these dudes paid like 2023 prices for their gas.
Thanks, Biden.
Okay, Cecil, don't be silly. Our current president wouldn't be born for another 39 years after the
Jesus
first
fucking Christ.
drive across America. He's 39 years younger than the first
Yes.
automobile drive across America.
Jesus
And
Christ.
now he has the nukes. We gave him the nukes.
All right, so after 3 days waiting out tourists, they said fuck it, and they moved on without their load of spare parts and tires. They got all of a day north or so before they broke down again, wound up stranded for a full day before anyone even passed by. When somebody eventually did, it was a cowboy that ultimately wound up towing their car to his house with his fucking horse. Now Crocker managed to fix the car, but while he was doing it, he accidentally let all the gas leak out. So then he had to rent the cowboy's bicycle from him, ride it 25 miles to the nearest store, pick up gas, and come back. And on the way back, the fucking bike got a flat, so he had to walk the bike for most of the
So
trip.
many things going wrong. Then his foot just burst into flame and exploded while he was trying to walk. And a guy showed up to help on a unicycle, but the guy had 0 arms. It's a whole thing. He did no help.
Okay, I gotta ask though, seriously, Noah, is this because I did the sports thing last week? Is that why you've taken this from me? This feels
I told Lucinda, I said, I love the stories where I know everybody else is going to get jealous of me for having this one, right? So they managed to get through Oregon and into Idaho without another major breakdown. And it's in Caldwell, Idaho, where their team finally rounds out to a trio with the addition of Bud the dog. Now-
There's a picture. There's
Yep.
a picture.
He's in his little goggles. Yeah, he's got his little goggles. So now, there's some controversy as to how Horatio acquired this bulldog. There were some contemporary sources that suggested that he stole him. Knowing how profligate Horatio was, that's really unlikely. His story is that he paid $15 for him. I don't see any reason to doubt him. But because the car had no windshield, and because there was a fuck ton of dust blowing around in the area they were driving through, they also had to get a pair of driving goggles altered to fit the dog. And yes, it will not be hard for you to find pictures online of Bud the dog and his little driving goggles.
Even with road dust asthma, it still breathed easier than Eli's dog.
No, that's fair because he had a snout.
All right, I see
Yeah.
a couch with wheels and a guy taking a difficult shit and a bulldog with goggles and a CPAP machine. When's the automobile coming? Is this?
That's been an interesting day, but yes. So at this point, they've actually gone through the hardest part of their trip. They would still get lost plenty more times. They'd have plenty more major breakdowns, and they'd lose a lot more stuff along the way, including at one point Horatio's coat with all his fucking money in it. But all of the can this even be done stuff was in the rear-view mirror, so to speak. But it was around this point that a new wrinkle appears in the story. See, once it had become clear what kind of press this trip was getting, a couple other auto manufacturers decided that they wanted in on the action. And they didn't want some other motherfucker's car to be the first to make it across the country. So in quick succession, 2 other major automakers at the time, Packard and Oldsmobile, sent out their own teams from San Francisco and made this thing a race.
okay. Race feels like it's doing a lot of work in that sentence, Noah.
Yeah, better hope a one-armed bicyclist doesn't join. Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, but that was a terrible day, though, right? They was like, now, fellas, the good news is the hard part is over. The bad news is I just got a telegram. 2 other groups of men just headed out to snatch this glory and make all of our suffering for nothing. So let's do lunch on the road, maybe?
Yeah, that's right. So now you might think that the race aspect wouldn't matter much given that Jackson and Crocker had a 3-week head start, but both of these teams had huge advantages. First of all, they were being financed by the companies themselves. They had the very best mechanics go over every inch of their cars beforehand. They had supplies and spare parts stationed along the way so they didn't have to wait for covered fucking wagons to catch up with them. They had access to government geological data that Horatio wouldn't have been able to get while they were planning their routes. And both teams were made up of 2 professional test drivers instead of some random rich guy and the first dude he met that knew how to crank a car and had 3 months to spare, right? Hell, the Packard team even had a dedicated mechanic that alternately rode along or took the train ahead and got shit set up for them when they arrived. They also had the advantage of a more direct route since both of those teams had hit upon the idea of using big mats to allow their cars to drive over the really loose desert sands that bogged down Winton's attempt.
Yeah, that big, gross, sticky mat is called Las Vegas. It lays right on the sand and you go straight through it.
Yep, that's a different episode. We'll talk more about that. Yeah. So the competition redoubled Horatio's resolve, but at this point, their car was like having the kind of problems that you couldn't just duct tape your way out of. Luckily, the Winton Motor Carriage Company was well aware of their effort by then, so they were really quick to get Horatio whatever the fuck he needed. They'd even offered to take over the planning, but Horatio was too stubborn to give that up, given the stellar job of navigation he'd been doing up to that point.
Oh, yeah. We don't want to deviate from the ask some random lady who sent us 108 miles off course on a prank warpath.
Yeah.
That's really been the secret to our success, you know?
Yeah. Now, the Packard team did manage to cover more than twice as many miles per day as Jackson and Crocker, at least in the early going, but the closest they ever came to catching up was to get within 10 days of them. Their trip was ultimately doomed by the PR guys who were planning it because they insisted that the route take their guys through every possible population center along the way. And they also wanted a lot of pictures of the car driving through rugged terrain with soaring mountain peaks in the background. Needless to say, they just got stuck in the fucking Rockies and forever, and by the time they emerged, they were hopelessly behind Horatio.
Guys, the Donner Party did a bunch of this route on foot. Like, how fucking hard can it be? In a car?
Now, the Oldsmobile team had even less luck. They started last and apparently also had the shittiest car. So they broke down more often, and in one amazing instance, the car broke in such a way that the only working gear was reverse. So they ended up like backing their way through over 100 miles of the trip. So ultimately, Jackson and Crocker would arrive in New York City on July 26th at 4:30 in the morning. Their entire trip took 63 days, 12 hours, and 30 minutes. There was no odometer in cars back then. And given the number of detours and wrong turns they took, there's really no way to precisely measure how far they actually drove. But they went through 800 gallons of gas, and Horatio said that the trip ultimately cost him $8,000.
Jesus.
That was like over $250,000 in today's money. The Packard and Oldsmobile teams both would make it to New York, but ultimately Jackson and Crocker would post the fastest time, despite all the advantages. The Oldsmobile team, I love this so much. They tried to cheat. They went on from New York to Boston, and then they said that they actually had the fastest time from San Francisco to Boston. But everybody knows that Boston is a second place version of New York, so it didn't count.
Yeah, and Boston still hasn't gotten any easier to drive through.
Right.
Yeah. But it is the same amount of racists. So, you got pros and cons.
It might have gone up.
So once in New York City, Horatio parted ways with Sewell. He rejoined his wife, and the two of them drove back to Vermont together in the same car that he'd just driven across the country in. Which broke down along the way. Actually, to get home, he actually had to wire his brothers and have them bring him a part for that car in their car. But once they got his car running, their car broke down. And he ended up having to tow them back home. Because, yes, the car was destined to take over the country, but it wasn't destined to do it just yet.
You're getting towed back on your left. Oh, come on. Same guy? Really? Fucking hate that guy.
So, quick footnote, by the way, Horatio didn't just fade away into historical obscurity after that trip. Despite being in his 40s when World War I broke out, he traveled overseas as an army surgeon. He won the Distinguished Service Cross. He won the French Croix de Guerre. He helped found.
That's right. That's
there's no way I'm getting it right. You know, he helped found the American Legion.
Wait, you didn't get that right?
It was pretty close to the first one. I thought.
Okay.
Quad the gap.
So he owned and operated a he owned and operated a radio station. He owned and operated a newspaper. He served as the president of a bank. But my favorite postscript is that soon after returning home, he became one of the very first Vermonters to ever receive a speeding ticket for driving over the statewide 6-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Amazing.
He was fined $5.
Nice.
And if you had to summarize what you learned in one sentence, what would it be?
Any story that contains a dog with goggles is a story worth an episode.
Absolutely. Are you ready for the quiz?
Best.
That
Tom.
I am, sir.
Okay, here we go, Noah. Obviously, Bud the dog is just aching for a biopic. What should they call it? A. Bud on the asphalt. It's the best one. They get worse.
It's downhill from there, huh?
B. Aston Martin the Bud.
What?
In the Blood
What?
is a movie.
Oh,
Chevrolet
Jesus Christ.
of the
Yikes.
dog. Day of the
Oh,
dog.
okay. So I get it. So, yeah,
These do get worse.
They-
You were right
they
about
do.
that.
Or D. GMC, that dog riding in your car.
So, all right. So I'm going to go with A.5 Bud on the highway.
That's correct.
All right, Noah. Driving across country in a car before there were roads is both dangerous and insane. But A, someone had to do it. Or B, no, they didn't.
So,
Yes.
that's really,
Yeah.
the point of the story. I cannot emphasize enough that the answer to that question is B. Yeah.
You did.
I
get
love
it.
that this was all from a giant drunken bet by some like body better gambler guy.
Yep.
You guys ever do that when you're in a bar and you're like, I could kick a 40-yard fucking field goal right now, and then you like go out and try to do it? I did that once. I could not, as it turned out, kick a 40-yard
I
field
did
goal.
something very similar to that once, Heath, and that's why I don't drink. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I still do. All right. Which of the following is a real thing that happened during a road trip that I took with Eli and Noah from New York to South Carolina for ReasonCon? A. Noah vowed to murder the entire family of a road sign. B.
It's true.
We learned that you're technically allowed to drink in the back seat of your vehicle in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So me and Anna finished an entire bottle of scotch during that like 2-hour stretch through Virginia on the way down. C. Me and Anna said hi to people at the convention way too fucking loud. D. I ordered 4 extra racks of ribs on top of the ones that I was eating when we ordered them at this place called 12 Bones. It's amazing. It's Obama's favorite ribs place. I ordered 4 extra to save for the drive home.
Yes.
And I ate them along the way, like for real, while we were driving. And at one point, Eli had to say to me, Heath, please lower your road meat. I can't see the mirror while he was driving. I believe that's exact words. Or E, thanks to Eli's tyrannical control of the music, we listened to the entire album The Sign
No.
by Ace
Wow.
of Base,
You saw
the
The Sign.
Europop band.
Wow.
More than once.
More than once.
So I wanted there is a scurrilous rumor that's been going on for a very long time that I vowed to murder the entire family of a road sign on a road trip from New York to South Carolina. That is not true. That happened on the way back from South Carolina to
That's
New York.
true.
So the correct
Oh,
answer
yeah.
is secret answer
Got it.
F, B through E.
Wow, because that's hard for you to figure out. But yes, it was F, exactly what you said, not including the one because of the exception, and the ribs were on that. But also, yep, it was what you said.
Oh,
Yep.
but the ribs were on it. That's why I am also wrong.
Yeah, that's why Heath
See,
won.
oh, now
Well,
it's
yeah,
different
okay. So
format.
technically, it was implied that you weren't allowed
You-
to use that
you-
technicality
You won, Heath.
because
You could stop now. You won.
I win.
It's okay.
Thank you, Cecil. You get to go next for helping me through that. just
Okay,
now.
I will go next week. Sounds great. All right. Well, for Tom, Noah, Eli, and Heath, I'm Cecil. Thanking you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week. By then, I will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, take a trip somewhere with a dog with goggles. And if you'd like to help keep this show going, you can make a per episode donation to patreon.com/citationpod. Leave us a 5-star review everywhere you can. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes. Be sure to check out citationpod.com.
The pilot.
And see, the only free movies are like these 2 or 3. If you want to watch the new releases, you have to pay, Great Uncle.
Two of my sons died in childbirth.
Oh, whatever. You don't get it.
I want to watch the Minions.
Yeah, I'll put on Minions.